Hey everyone, this is Dr. Eric Fields. So today I'm discussing what I think is the most important pillar of an effective weight loss plan for people like us. And it's people like us where this is the most important one because people like us not just simply struggle with losing weight and keeping it off, but we struggle with a food dependency issue. And that is why we have so much difficulty losing weight and keeping it off. We have a food addiction. I've spent a long time dealing with people with addictions, and it occurred to me a long time ago when I really started working with people with addictions, and before that, with eating disorders, that, you know what? A lot of people struggle with addiction or unhealthy psychological dependencies. But a lot of the psychological dependencies, they're looked upon as rather benign. Like people joke around all the time and they say like, oh, I have a cell phone addiction or I have a social media addiction. Or I have, or even with food addiction, many people say like, oh, I have a food addiction or I have an addiction to sweets or ice cream or something of that nature. And many times, it's joked around about and what have you. But at the end of the day, the when it becomes a real issue is quite simply when it starts making you feel badly about yourself. Okay. So if you want to joke around and say I have a cell phone addiction, or I'm addicted to the Real Housewives, I'm watching that show or this show or that show, that's fine. You can joke around like that. That's fine. Um, and it's really not an addiction. It's something that you're really, really into. Maybe we'll call it a mild obsession. But when it becomes an addiction, it means we are relying on it for something. And I don't know any addictions that don't make the person feel badly about relying on that thing. The reason why we feel badly relying on something else is because it's never a good substitute. Listen, if these things that people rely on did not cause adverse consequences in their lives, and it worked really well without any really ill effects and worked better than any other method of dealing with whatever it was they were trying to deal with, then it wouldn't be an issue. But we have to look at those two main factors, the negative consequences. And a lot of times people will say like, no, there's no negative consequences to that. But then the other piece of it you have to consider is this causing me some kind of distress or grief in and by itself is a negative consequence, right? Because it is a poor substitute. Addictions and psychological dependencies, I'm using those two terms interchangeably, right? Not every addiction has a physical dependency, but every addiction has a psychological dependency. That is the definition of an addiction. Every single addiction is a poor substitute for whatever function it's serving, okay? If you're using alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, or food to cope, I can guarantee you that that is not nearly as good in terms of the way it makes you feel, but even more importantly, its mere effectiveness is not nearly as good as the real thing, which is you developing good coping skills and learning how to cope with things on your own, learning to rely on yourself to deal with any kind of stress or emotional upset. Some people use addictions to substitute for a void in their life. They want a romantic relationship. They want a partner. They don't have that. Well, That's not a hard case to make at all, that's a very poor substitute, right? And so trying to do things that increase your chance of finding that special someone, okay, far, far outweighs relying on something that's just a means to an end, you know, sitting there and, stuffing our faces or doing drugs or alcohol or some other behavior to distract us or to try to fill that void is never going to get us to that goal. So there's two functions that I just named. And there are many, many others. Let's talk about if you are someone that's going through some kind of trauma or loss. Again, that is a poor substitute. Those dependent behaviors are a poor substitute for working through the grief and the upset and everything else, and the distress, and really trying to work through that in a healthy way, rather than relying on these things that don't help you work through it at all. It just postpones it. So we have to start with this premise that these not only cause negative consequences that in and by themselves make us feel badly, but they prolong our agony because they're not dealing with this thing as effectively as a more genuine, healthy method of dealing with it. This is so, so essential. It's something you really have to look at. This food dependency issue is what is the main culprit. I said before that psychology has everything to do with effective weight loss. And I mean that, just as a general blanket statement, that anybody that's having significant weight loss issues that don't have some major physical reason why they can't lose weight, there's a psychological barrier. Sometimes it's just a motivational issue. Other times, it's an issue with not creating the right diet or food plan or exercise program that works best with their personality. And so, these plans that are created produce too much discomfort. But more times than not, if it's a chronic issue, it's a long-standing issue with having trouble losing weight, it is a psychological dependency issue. And out of the 4 pillars, this one, for people like us, is the most important. Every single one of these pillars is important for people like us, but this last one is really what differentiates people like us from other people that, I gained a little weight, I got to go on a diet, or I got to be more conscientious about what I eat, and voila, a couple months later, and they lose the weight. They never get too overweight, right? They have like a little weight to lose, and when they make up their mind, they do it, and it's relatively easy, right? That's those people, right? Or people that complain that they're like 5 pounds overweight, which isn't even considered overweight. And, they're upset they can't see their 6-pack anymore. People we can't relate to, right? Because we've been significantly overweight, and we've been significantly overweight for a long time. And we've yo-yoed back and forth from losing to gaining, losing to gaining. And it's been a long-standing issue. We can't understand those people. So the food dependency issue, the food addiction, I know you don't like hearing that, but it's just a word that says you're having an issue with your relationship with this thing. If I say somebody has an alcohol addiction, what I'm basically saying is they have a problematic relationship with alcohol. They're using it inappropriately. What are appropriate reasons to use alcohol for? To go out and socialize, to take a little edge off from time to time, to put yourself in an altered mental state from time to time because it's fun and, we want to change it up every now and then. Nothing wrong with that. And dare I say, even once in a while, as a little bit of a stress relief. Not the type of thing where we need it, but that's nice. I had a rough week. It's nice to take a little edge off. On occasion, there's nothing wrong with that. When you start using it for those kinds of reasons, though, all the time and consistently, that's when there's an issue. I mean, who hasn't said like, oh, I deserve it, this big ice cream sundae, or I deserve this special treat. I'm going all out, on my dinner tonight, celebrating. It's fine. Or maybe I've had such a stressful week. You know what? I'm just going to fill my face with this and, this enjoyable treat and just kind of check out once in a while. It's not about never being able to do that. It's not like, I'm not saying like, don't ever use anything for any other reason other than, right? No, it's when you do that consistently that you start depending on it. Like, I can't deal with this thing, stress, trauma, being lonely, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Without this thing, that's when it's an issue. This food dependency thing is the most important thing for us to attack. And the first part of this video that I've been trying to accomplish in this first part is getting past denial. Let's stop sugarcoating it. Let's just call it what it is. It's a food addiction, and that's okay, because there's many people with addictions, many, many people. And I'm not just talking about alcohol, drug, and everything else. There are so many different types of dependencies. There are people with video game addictions. There are people that are addicted to being on their cell phones. And with our definition of addiction, it is causing them distress. It's impacting their life in a negative way. They're not getting enough sleep, and they're not dealing with what they should be dealing with directly. They're using this as a distraction, and it's only prolonging that issue and compounding it because you're not dealing with it. If you don't deal with an issue, a lot of times it gets bigger and worse. There's a lot of people that would fit that definition. So the first point I want to make is you're not so abnormal. If anything, there's a really good chance we are normal in the sense that there are so many people out there that do struggle with some kind of psychological dependency. Some people even struggle with psychological dependency on another person, which is not healthy. So when you look at that definition, a lot of us would fall into that category. So just get over this whole idea that, oh, that's an ugly word, I don't want to admit it. It's the reason why you're stuck. This is the main reason why you're stuck. Motivational issues, failure to create a proper exercise and eating plan that works better with you, absolutely are issues too. But this is the biggest one. Going back to that metaphor of the chair with four legs, this is like the biggest leg. If 3 of the 4 legs are about 2 inches in diameter, this one is about 20 inches in diameter. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like as big as the trunk of a redwood. That'd be a funny looking chair, but you know what I'm saying? This is the most important issue. And this one, I don't think I have to make a case for in terms of psychology having everything to do with. This is everything. I mean, this is our psychological dependency on food, and that we have to deal with this. So the first part of this video, I just hope that I can get you past this denial. That is the biggest thing. I know you're expecting like a lot of tips and strategies on how to deal with it. What is that going to do for you if you can't even admit you have this issue? So let's start with just acknowledging that we have this issue, and there's nothing so horribly awful or wrong about that. I mean, listen, these behaviors work on some level. Does alcohol and drugs and sex and gambling and food help you deal with unhealthy emotions? Yes, they do, but only in the short term. And they leave you with a lot of other issues. And they don't do such a great job. They work, but they don't do that good of a job. You see what I'm saying? It's like the difference between a boss hiring a temp that's never had any experience with this particular job versus a seasoned veteran. You see what I'm saying? Like, food is like the temp that we hired. They're kind of doing the job, but not that good, and probably causing more issues for us than need be. When you get past this denial, then we can do some real work. And the real work, I've already alluded to in a lot of the other videos. And so I can kind of recap that here. But the real work has to do with changing our relationship with food, which has to do with changing our mindset about food, our perspective on food. There are two approaches in cognitive therapy that are very relevant here. There was a gentleman by the name of Albert Ellis, and he had his kind of own bent on cognitive therapy, which basically purports that if you change the way you think, that can lead to positive changes in the way that you feel and the things that you do, our behavior. He called it rational emotive therapy. And he had his own angle on that in terms of like what kind of thoughts are the most problematic. And then there was a gentleman who really is considered the founder of cognitive therapy, Aaron Beck. And Aaron Beck had a slightly different bent on it. And he was basically looking at other kinds of thoughts that he thought were problematic. I see there being benefit to both approaches, so I use both of them. And the way that I use them is in this kind of stepwise fashion. First, I like to use Aaron Beck's approach and see if I make segue with that. And then if not, I'll try Albert Ellis's approach. The reason why I will do that is I will show you. With Aaron Beck, what you're looking at is beliefs that are not based on evidence. And so you're basically coming from the premise that the reason why I have this issue is because there's not, I'm thinking there is no evidence for something, or the evidence that I am saying is just, is not substantial enough, right? Basically, with that perspective, what you're looking for is, are my thoughts logical? Are they based on objective facts? Are they based on good, substantial evidence? Sometimes you'll find that they are. And so then I will use the next approach, which is Albert Ellis's, to look at, is there an issue of acceptance then? Because those are the kind of thoughts that he proclaimed were the most problematic. Thoughts where we don't accept the way things are. Okay, so let's put that into practice, right? I'm sitting there and I'm having these food urges and I want to eat so badly. And I start looking at the evidence. Am I that hungry? I ate an hour ago. That doesn't seem like a lot of evidence for being this hungry. What did I have to eat? Well, I had a substantial meal, about 700 calories. Now it can't be that. All right, so it's not a physiological need. So I'm hungry, but I'm not hungry for physical reasons. I'm hungry for emotional reasons, most likely. Yeah, I'm anxious. I'm anxious about my performance review at my job tomorrow. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't deal with this anxiety. The only way I can deal with this anxiety is with food. Is there evidence for that? Is the only way I can deal with this anxiety food? Will food really make me feel that much better? Probably make me feel a little bit better in the short term, but then I'll feel worse because then I'll feel guilty that I ate when I really didn't need to eat. I ate for the wrong reasons. It's unhealthy. This is more acting on an addiction and those kinds of urges or cravings. Um, let me test this assumption. I think it's false, but let me test it. I'm saying I can't deal with this anxiety. I'm going to give myself about a half an hour. Maybe I'll try to engage in some healthy behaviors like cleaning the house or taking care of some things that will make me feel good, make me feel like I'm in control. Because this evaluation, I feel like I'm no longer in control of it. It's out of my hands. Someone is evaluating me, and whatever is, and I'll find that out tomorrow. I can't do anything about that right now. I can't change my past behavior. If there was a way I could have increased my productivity at work, maybe got a better evaluation, I have no control of that anymore. It's over. The evaluation is done, and I'm finding out tomorrow. So what can I do? Well, I can do productive, healthy things. And are there any other thoughts I have that might not be based on good evidence? Well, I'm worrying that the evaluation is not going to be good. Well, how did I do this year? I only had a couple sick days. I tried really hard. I made some really good segue in some of these projects. My boss gave me a few accolades during the year. I also know my coworkers seem very pleased just by their reactions to my performance and in my dealings with them. I mean, there's not really any good evidence that I would have a bad evaluation. So that's Aaron Beck's approach. Here's Albert Ellis's approach. So let's get up to that point where I start worrying about the evaluation. However, in this situation, there is good evidence for me to be worried. I'm worried about this evaluation tomorrow. I've had about 15 sick days this year. That's a lot. A couple times I had meetings with my boss about my performance. I know I had some conflict with a few coworkers. We lost that deal early on in the year, and good case could be made for being, my fault to at least a decent degree. Yeah, there's a good chance I might not get a good evaluation tomorrow. So now we have to kind of switch, and we have to say, like, there is evidence to be anxious. There's not good evidence to stuff our face still, though, right? Aaron Beck's approach still works for challenging those assumptions, because there's never going to be a case for that. So Aaron Beck's approach will always work well for that. But when we're doing the actual work, right, when we're really trying to cope with this on our own, sometimes Aaron Beck's approach will fall short, and we have to rely on Ellis's approach. And in this case, where our performance was pretty questionable over the course of the year, and we are anxious about this evaluation, now we have to kind of look at it from another standpoint. Okay, no, I made some mistakes. I have to learn from that. I have to, take responsibility for that. I have to take ownership of that. There is a good chance that my evaluation will not go well tomorrow. But I also have to be brutally honest with myself. I don't really like my job. I'm not saying it's not my fault in terms of my behavior and performance, but what I am saying is, this is representative of a job role that really doesn't fit me, that I don't really like, and I have to get real with myself. It's probably time to start looking for another job. Now, when I go in there tomorrow, and if I get a really bad evaluation, I'm going to have to accept that. It's not the end of the world. Even if, God forbid, I were to get fired over it, I would likely be able to eventually find a new job. This is not a life or death situation. This person doesn't have control over my destiny or my, whether or not I'm going to keep living. They don't have that kind of control over my self-worth. And if I allow them to have that control of my self-worth, then that's my problem. but I do have to accept this situation. And if we start feeling ourselves saying things like, oh, I can't possibly get a bad evaluation tomorrow. That would be horrible. That will be the worst. I just couldn't stand it. I wouldn't be able to deal with it. That level of non-acceptance to that degree is just as irrational as having thoughts not based on evidence or logic, right? So when you start looking at it like there's no way I could deal with that, this will be the worst thing in the world, that extremist language in and by itself connotates that there's something dysfunctional about the way that we're looking at this. So even when evidence is there to support that we should be worried about something or depressed or upset about something, our reaction and our level of non-acceptance can be the main culprit to us not handling this as best as we could. Now, I know some of you might say, like, well, you know, if you did a better job during the year, you wouldn't have that issue. But there are many times where things happen and things that aren't even attributable to our behavior, where we can say things that connotate a lack of acceptance, like that can't happen because if that does, I just won't be able to deal with it. I won't be able to stand it. That'll be horrible. It'll be the most awful thing in the world. And we catastrophize things. We make them worse than they really are. We make this situation, which may be bad if it happens, even worse, or make a bad situation that already happened much worse. The bottom line is coping with these unpleasant emotions, such as anxiety, depression, extreme anger. It starts with reflecting on our thoughts, on our beliefs, and really making sure that they're objective, based on logic and evidence, that they're rational, that they're not too extreme or exaggerated, and that they don't inappropriately fail to accept the situation. And this is not easy. By the way, when I'm talking about this, I'm not talking about this in a way that has this, insinuation of being very easy to do. I know it's not easy to do. It takes work. And so when we look at our food dependency, right, if we're going to do like pros and cons, like pros and cons of the food dependency, pros and cons of doing this kind of real, genuine coping work, right? Here's a pro of the food dependency. It's quick, it's easy, and it works almost immediately. Here's the con. It only works for a brief amount of time, and then it causes more unhealthy feelings and causes us to feel more shitty about ourselves and makes the problem that was supposed to be helping us deal with even worse because we're avoiding it. Whenever you avoid an issue, it generally tends to get worse. And makes us, feel badly about not being able to address an issue in the right way. It makes us feel out of control in our life because we're relying on something else to do what we should be doing for ourselves. There's all these hosts of negatives. It just, right? But that one positive, it does work quickly, right? Almost all these behaviors, right, work quickly. I'm feeling an icky emotion, so I impulsively jump online and gamble. I impulsively go online and engage in pornography. I go online and order food. I drink a bottle of scotch. I do some drugs. They all work very quickly and are very convenient. It's very easy to engage in these behaviors. Just got to go to the refrigerator, go to the liquor cabinet, etc., jump online, and you can engage in many types of unhealthy, compulsive, impulsive behaviors. So when we're looking at the pros and cons of using, like, say, cognitive techniques to deal with these unpleasant, icky emotions, which are healthy coping skills, The con is it takes time. You got to practice this. You got to do it over and over and over again until it becomes easier and easier, and until you get better and better at doing it, and you start slowly changing your automatic way of responding and reacting to situations that tends to compound those situations and leads you to do unhealthy behaviors and leads to the feelings going from an appropriate emotion to an inappropriate, really unhealthy emotion, right? Instead of being concerned about that performance review, you are consumed with anxiety. Instead of being disappointed by something not working out in your life, you become utterly depressed. Instead of being annoyed at somebody, you become rageful and seriously angry. And that's the difference. These skills take time, and that's the con. That's the benefit of doing this. So you're not crazy. There is a reason why we've gravitated to these quick fixes, such as compulsive eating, because they're easy, convenient, and we can engage in them quickly. The problem is they don't work well and they cause all these issues. And on this side of the equation, coping with things, developing good, healthy, psychological coping skills takes time. But when you start to develop them, it leads to healthier emotions, healthier behaviors, not compulsive, impulsive behaviors, right? Leads to healthy behaviors, such as, okay, so this is what I'm going to do differently for my performance review, okay? Or this is how I'm going to feel about that performance review tomorrow, which is much healthier and not as exaggerated of a response, not as negative as a response. And they don't lead to other kinds of unhealthy, negative consequences. And they certainly don't diminish our self-esteem. And that's another main thing I want to bring up. You know, when you're relying on something else or somebody else, and when I'm talking about somebody else, I'm not talking about like a professional, right? Or somebody that really is valuable in terms of helping you. I'm talking about, you know, just unhealthily relying on another person for emotional needs in that way. When you're able to rely on yourself, right, to take care of these things, and to take care of yourself in terms of your mental health and your psychological well-being, that gives confidence, that enhances self-esteem. When we rely on other things, that diminishes our self-esteem, because the message then is, we can't do this on our own. We need something. We can't do it on our own. We don't have that capacity. This was a long video in our 4-part series. I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning, but I think you guys can figure it out. This is part 4, the final video in this 4-part series on the last and most important pillar, which is why I saved it for the end, and which is why I spent so much time on it. And this is what really makes me the real weight loss expert. You know, people look at my name and they say, you know, the weight loss pro. What makes him such a weight loss pro? He lost weight. Okay. Many people have lost weight. Yeah, I lost weight. That's true. Right. And many people have lost weight. But here's the difference. I broke a food dependency issue, and that is not easy to do. And I'm not putting this video out there to kind of give you guys this idea that it's easy to do. What I want to give you the idea of is that it's necessary to do. It has to be done. And this is why I consider myself an expert, because not only have I done it for myself and overcome this really difficult issue that is behind so many people's longstanding weight loss issues, but I've helped so many people do it as well. And I hope this video starts that process of accepting that you have this food addiction, this food dependency issue, and accepting why you have it, and not pathologizing it, not making you feel so badly about it. Understanding that, yes, it served the purpose. In the long run, it's been really bad for you, but it did serve a purpose. You're not crazy. You did it for a good reason. Your reasons were good. It's just the end result was not good. And there's a much better option. So I hope this video was really helpful. If you guys have any questions or comments, please post them. I'd be happy to respond to them. This is Dr. Fields, and I'll talk to you soon.